out. I'm absolutely thrilled. So, I teach, as Judy said, I teach for the Chicago Botanic Garden. And ever since COVID, I started teaching on Zoom. So I'm very familiar with this setup. And I don't know exactly how this usually goes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint and I'm going to sort of talk as I paint, kind of stream of consciousness. I hope that's acceptable. I'm getting some nods. Okay. Because really, making art is all about making choices, isn't it, as you go? Um, and a lot of what I mention is probably going to be very elementary for many of you. I imagine there are different levels of experience in this room. So if I talk about things that seem very basic, please don't be insulted. I'm not underestimating you, but I just kind of want to make this accessible to everyone. Um, I want to begin by talking about my setup because it's not exactly typical for watercolorists. And this is my palette. And I know this is not unusual. And the advantage to this, of course, is that you can select your own colors as opposed to buying a set that's already set up for you. And I prefer to use colors. Most of my colors are just one pigment in the tube. Um, that way I kind of know what I'm working with. I do have a few exceptions. People give me stuff, like they'll come to me and say, oh, my 99-year-old mom passed away and she had all these watercolors. And so I end up with colors that maybe I wouldn't pick out by myself, which is kind of fun. So those mostly live over here. And I want to mention, just so you know, if you have rock hard watercolors, don't throw them out. They're perfectly good. They never go bad. And what I do is I use an X-Acto knife to cut down the center of the tube. You all know this. And at the ends, and I butterfly it open. And that's why you see this one has like this shape of the tube, because that's where it came from. And I just sort of wet them and I stick them on here. And if they don't stick, I glue them down. Word to the wise. Okay, so those are my colors. Glue. I mean, hot glue is great. I suppose Elmer's, but I think I use hot glue so it's like instantaneous. And if they fall off, I glue them again. So, and then the part that's a little different, I think, is the way I mix my colors. I use these metal, these are brushed aluminum mixing trays or palettes. I buy these at Blick, and I'm very particular about this. Now, I think most watercolorists use those big flat butcher trays. I don't like them. And the reason I don't like them is because the colors kind of all flow together. And what I love about these is that each color that I mix has its own little separate cup. Now, sometimes if I put too much water in, they slap into each other, but really I can control exactly what's going on in these cups. And I have lots of these. I didn't even bring all the ones that I have. The other thing that's really great about this is that I just leave these sitting out in my studio and the water evaporates overnight and I can rehydrate the colors so you don't waste paint that way. So that's my peculiar thing. The other thing is the brushed aluminum. I prefer this to sometimes you'll see these beautiful Japanese porcelain palettes. The thing about them though, and the butcher trays, is that they're very slick. And this is a uber nerd fact here. But when I mix the colors in this and I go to kind of wick off the water, there's a little texture and it wicks off the water off the brush in such a way that I can really control the load on the brush. That doesn't really happen with the porcelain trays or the butcher trays because they're so smooth. So I just personally prefer that. So that's something you might want to try if you like. I teach beginners and also more advanced watercolorists through the Botanic Garden. And I always tell them that this is my setup. I'm not a dictator. Some watercolor instructors are very rigid about how it has to be. I'm not like that at all. It's just not my personality. So I just make the suggestion and people can use whatever they have and whatever they prefer. I think that's Oh, one more thing about my setup. So I did bring in this little tablet so that I have the photo on the tablet, and that way I can pinch and enlarge to see detail. I also you can see it on the screen. I printed it out. So this is a photo that I took at the Botanic Garden. And I really love it for a lot of reasons. I think the composition is good. And also, I like that it has a figure in it. Um, and the figure happens to kind of remind me of my mom, who passed away a few years ago. And there's just something, first of all, my mom had outfits just like that. And there's just something about the way she's standing. So I'm kind of fond of this one. So with that being said, I think I'm going to get started. Reading glasses.
So do you usually print and use the tablet together or no print?
No, I don't usually print it out. And in fact, when I'm teaching, I have two monitors in front of me. So I have an overhead cam like this, and then I also have a camera that's on my face so that when the class starts, I can say hello to people. Then I toggle to the other one. So actually, I'm seeing what my students are seeing. So on one screen, I have the photo, and on the other screen, I have my painting. So actually, it's really interesting seeing your painting as you're painting it on the screen is actually, I find that very helpful. It just sort of gives you a different perspective. So it's going to be a little funny for me today because I don't have that in front of me, but I'll manage. I'm adaptable. And that being said, speaking of tech, I do often recommend, this is sliding around a little, I recommend to people that as you're working, you can take a picture of your painting with your cell phone and seeing it on the small screen, I find that very helpful. I don't know why that is, but somehow seeing it smaller, you can right away you see if you've made errors and stuff, or what needs improvement, whatever. Okay, so it's enough talking. I'm going to get started. Oh, and one of well, right. I have some postcards here for my art exhibit, so if anybody wants to take one, they're welcome to it. So I did take the time last night to pencil this in. And normally I do that when I'm teaching, I do it live because I don't expect my students to have that done before they come to class. But I realized like I've got 2 hours to get this done, so I better pencil it in. So I'm generally, I start with light, warm colors and work towards the more saturated, cool colors. But in this case, I think I'm going to start with the sky. And oftentimes I will do the sky after I do the trees and things and sort of work it in around. But in this case, there's nothing that's in front of the sky that doesn't have blue in it. There's only green things. So if I had red flowers sticking up, I might do this differently. So I think I'm going to start with that. I want to mention that I don't pre-wet my watercolor paper. I like to really control the water load on the paper, so I wet it as I go. I don't stretch it. Partly that's because I don't like the cut edge after you cut it off. What I've done here is I've put masking fluid around the perimeter, and that gives me kind of an irregular border. I could have taped it, but I like it a little bit bumpy so that it sort of imitates the decal edge of the page. Also, this paper is 300-pound Arches cold press. And I usually work on 140, but I just thought I'd treat myself today. Special for you. I did, as I said, I penciled it in, but I erase as I go. All right, so for my, I have this nice little dropper bottle, and I put water into my little palette, like maybe half a teaspoon, a few drops. For my sky, I'm going to work with cobalt blue. I usually like to mix cobalt and ultramarine for my sky color. And cobalt is great for skies because it's a very liftable color. You know, some of the blues are staining colors. Phthalo blue is, boy, I should have added more. You can really tell I like cobalt because this is some, yeah, we can, okay. I can move it over closer, David, if that's better. the thing about cobalt and ultramarine is that they lift. So if I want to move things around, add some clouds, I can actually take this off the paper by washing it off. Phthalo blue is a very, very staining color, as is Prussian blue. Not quite as much as phthalo, but it stains. So I used to like Prussian blue for skies, and I figured out, like, kind of shooting myself in the foot here using Prussian, even though it is a nice color. So I've made a nice mix here, and I've got my sketchbook here, and this is where I kind of test out my colors. So this whole sketchbook is just filled with little tabs of color. That's really pretty much what I use it for. It's more saturated. Okay. So I almost always paint with more than one brush at a time. The challenge for a person of small brain like myself is remembering what colors on which brush. When I get up to 3 brushes, I'm really in trouble. Okay, so also I want to add a little Payne's gray because there's a little cloud in this picture. And I find that Payne's gray is really good for that. Oh, that's really saturated. So Payne's gray, it's called gray, but it's a bluish color. So it's very nice for clouds. Okay. All right. So when we paint clouds, basically you're leaving the white of the page to be the clouds. And what you're doing is you're negative painting around them. Now, the right half of this image is pretty much just behind the trees background. So I can take my big 1-inch flat and just extend the wash. And I'm going to water it down because it's going behind the trees and I don't want this to be really saturated. So I'm working quickly because I don't want to have brush strokes in this area. And I'm doing what I call a flawless wash, which means I'm extending the wet edge and keeping the wet edge wet so that I can extend it and not get a line. And it's okay to have lines over here because I've got the contours of the clouds. I'm just going to sort of blend out that edge. Okay, so that went on nicely. I already got mixed up. Told you. No, I didn't. Okay. And of course, I may make alterations and not paint this image exactly as it appears. It's my prerogative because that's why we call it art and not life, because it's not it's not the same thing. Okay, so I'm taking this wet brush and just sort of smudging the edge a little.
If those are lifting colors, the blues, could you lift your clouds out?
I could. Yes, and in fact, I'll show you how I would do that. I can put down some blue over here. And I can crumple up a paper towel. And just press it into the paint. And I get a really nice cloud. So that's 2 different ways to do clouds. And this is a live demo of my mental limitations. And the other thing that's wonderful about cold press is that you can lay the brush down flat and take advantage of a dry brush effect to get the kind of broken edge of the clouds. So when we do dry brush, it's good to lay the brush flat because if you have it upright, you're going to get lines. So now I want to bring in a little bit of the Payne's gray. I'm happy with that. All right. So it's good to start with the general and work towards the specific, start with big areas and work towards small. So the next thing I'm going to address is this brick walkway over here. I'm just going to look for the lightest color on the sunlit place, which is kind of in the background there.
Can you show your
Reference photo?
Yeah,
I sure don't see the brick.
your
So this is my reference photo.
okay, thanks.
Sorry, I'm not aware of what's on the screen yet. Well, I think we're okay. So I'm gonna do this lightest color. And if you want me to show it again, just remind me, okay? Because I'll forget. A little more flat.
Good job, David.
Yeah, zoom out. Excellent. Okay. So I've already got this. I think it was a permanent origin from the other day. It's very bright. I'm going to add some burnt sienna. Quinacridone gold. Oops, it's this one. I don't know if you know the quinacridone colors. They're so beautiful. They were actually created in the 1970s for car manufacturers because remember Harvest Gold is really popular, and they needed a color that wouldn't fade with sunlight. So it's a really high-tech color. That's why it's so expensive. It's expensive to make it. But then they, found that they could make all these different warm hues of rose and magenta, and they're very clean colors in the mix. A little more pink. Put a little alizarin crimson in, and I'm just going to mention the colors as I use them. Oops.
I do a full notebook full of little bands.
Yeah, the whole thing, if you looked at it. Okay. I'm watering it down right on the paper. And I don't work super wet. As I showed you, I like to do this sort of flawless wash technique where I start the wash at one end and I kind of work it down. I mean, there are times when I'll work more wet, but I had a student in a class once who she started by wetting her whole paper. And she had it taped to a board. There's one of my dog hairs.
Very familiar.
They're everywhere. So she had it down really to a system where she knew the rate of drying and she would sort of work her piece that way. I just don't work like that, but everybody's got their own way. Okay, so this gives me the sunlit areas and then I can put in the shadows as I go. All right, now I have put masking fluid on these white hollyhocks. So aside from that, it's just on the border. No, nowhere else. I don't like using masking fluid for clouds because masking fluid is going to give you a very hard edge. And, clouds don't usually look that graphic. So I don't like that. All right. So I think I'm going to move on to the figure and then the flowers. I'm going to mix some of the khaki color for the hat and the trousers. Yellow ochre. How am I doing? Is this what you're used to? Is this cool? Okay. Just checking in. And if you have questions as I'm working, you're welcome to ask them. So I'm using a yellow ochre and sepia. It's pretty good for the hat. It's very light. And I'll put in the shading after. And then the pants are a little darker, so I'll add a little more sepia. Add in the shading later. Right. All right. So now I'm looking at the floral area and gonna lay down a lot of yellow. But before I do that, I want to get the red flowers in because I'm going to have to negative paint around them. And then, oh, look at that. Nice the red already here. So this is quinacridone magenta with some schmutz in it that I wipe out. All right. So often when I'm teaching, usually I mix all the colors first and then I work. I don't know why I'm not doing it that way today. I'm just not. That way my students kind of know, what they're going to be using, if they're using the same colors as me. Now this magenta is a little too magenta for those. I don't know if they're rhododendrons. Anybody know what those are? Those red flowers? See, when I teach at the Botanic Garden, a lot of my students are gardeners. I am not. So they'll like pipe right up.
Yeah, those are.
Oh, azaleas, actually, maybe. It might be. Not sure. Okay, so I just added, what did I just add? Some alizarin crimson to the magenta. It's getting there.
It looks much more red than it does. It looks very scarlety here, just so people know.
Oh, right. So the color on the monitor
This way.
is it's warmer, but my painting will look warmer too.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. It'll yeah, and then you'll get to see the actual thing at the end. You'll go, oh. Right. I've got some. I think this is Pyro Red. I'm gonna just mix in here. Oh, I love that. Okay. Now I'm gonna show you a fun technique. Instead of just applying the red paint and painting a bunch of flowers, I like to do it in sort of two stages. I like to start with water and sort of drop the red into the water. And what that does is it gives me some variegation. So it shows kind of the light hitting the blossoms. And somehow the color just looks more vivid when I do that. Now you can see that I've got a lot of pencil here. And I always erase the pencil as I go. I don't love the look of pencil lines in my watercolors. I know there's nothing wrong with it. Winslow Homer and John Singer Sargent, they are the gods in my watercolor pantheon. And you can see in Homer's paintings, you can see a lot of pencil work. So I know that it's good enough for Winslow, it's good enough for me. But I don't know, it doesn't seem to add. So I'm taking it out. I left it in for the pants because I want to follow all those full lines. But having drawn it, that sort of took me through the ergonomic exercise, of putting that down. So it makes it easier for me to remember where that should go. So I'm going to start with water on one brush. And look how gorgeous that is. I mean, how much fun. Watercolor is the only medium that gives you this. The wet into wet.
It is.
It's just so delightful. How could we live without it? And sometimes, like these are such beautiful flowers. I'll probably put more in than are in the photo because I love them. Yeah, I mean, when you have this color, you got to make the most of it. So I would say my style is a combination of careful, picky, and also loose. I try to, um, have some elements that are a little looser, and I would say that the way I'm applying this is pretty loose. I don't like it too tight because to me that just looks tedious. So now if I drop the color next to a dry spot instead of right in the middle of the wet spot, it's going to be more saturated. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's see. Gets a little closer to the lady. And I'll shade this stuff later if I remember. All right. And then in the foreground there are some little reddish leaves that might be coleus. So I'll put those in. And that is a slightly different hue. And I'm going to use a smaller brush for those. So I'll start with, oh, and I also want to mention one of the benefits of kind of mixing your colors in advance is, or even as you go, you want to use the colors you've already used as many places as you can within a painting, rather than just continually cherry picking from your palette, because it gives it sort of more internal uniformity or integrity. Sorry, what was there? Continuity, exactly. So, and like I said, I know these are things you've heard already, but you might just hear them again today. So I'm adding some quinacridone gold to this color that I've already used. Needs a little more red. That's pretty good. Okay, so up in the foreground, I've got these beautiful coleus leaves. And again, I'll probably do more than what's here. And I'll sort of try to do these in a stroke. One of the things that I teach in my beginner's watercolor class is I do a whole session on sumi-e, which is Japanese brush painting. And it's sort of a crash course because I went all the way through art school and I was handed brushes, and I never had an instructor actually teach me brush technique. Maybe you did. I did not. I had to learn that on my own. And I discovered sumi-e, and it was like a revelation. And it has influenced everything about the way I use my brush. So I teach that in every single intro to watercolor class because it's so useful. I'm adding more quinacridone gold for the some of these leaves that I see on the side here. And there's like a flare. Here we go. Right here, it looks like there's a brick wall or something, but it's just a sunlight flare. Yeah, so I'm sort of trying to ignore that.
Can you spell sumi for us?
Yes, SUMI-E. Sumi-e. Sumi is the ink, and A I think means the painting. Not positive. I don't speak Japanese, but I believe that's what it is. So if you go to buy the ink, it's Sumi ink. And my favorite kind of Sumi ink is Yasutomo. And you can buy it in a nice green bottle that has a wide opening so you can dip your brush right into it. It also, don't buy the kind that has a tiny little screw cap, because then you have to decant it, which isn't the end of the world, but you don't always want to do that.
You do that on watercolor paper or rice paper?
Oh, I use it on watercolor paper or rice paper. Yeah, either one. It works on anything.
Is it watercolor or is it ink?
No, it's ink.
Okay, so it's.
But what I'm saying is I'm really not emphasizing the ink so much. When I teach the sumi-e technique, it's a style of working that I do with my watercolor brush. Okay, now the next thing I want to put in, there are some tiny little yellow flowers, and it's important to get those in. Just happen to have some. So I have cadmium lemon, which is the coolest, lightest yellow, cadmium yellow, and I also have cadmium yellow light, and I have cadmium yellow medium. I like them all. I also have a lovely color is Turner's yellow, which is kind of a more buttery color. And I don't think that it has white in it. It almost looks like it could. Naples yellow, I believe, has white in it, so it's not permitted by the Transparent Watercolor Society. I'm not really a watercolorist. I mean, I do tons of watercolor and I love it, but I'm not just a watercolorist. I think of myself more as a painter who loves watercolor. So rules don't apply to me. I realize, like, if I ever wanted, I haven't entered the shows for the Transparent Watercolor Society, and I thought, oh, maybe I should do that. And I could, skip using some of the colors that I have here on my palette. I have I have a little chart here. This is my cheat chart that has all my colors because I always mix up Persian rose and opera rose, and Persian rose is the one that has a little white in it. So that would get me kicked out. So I'm just sort of seeing some yellow back there. I'm just putting it in. Dotting in these little tiny things. See, this is where the screen comes in handy because I can really enlarge. There's so many different kinds of flowers in here. And I don't have to, render them all, but it's fun to, more the merrier. And there's even a little orange something. Let's get that done. So you might notice that I hold my brush upright. That's very much a sommelier technique. And it's a really good idea because what it does is it allows the bristles to do what they want to do. If you're laying your brush down, like where you holding it like a pencil, it doesn't work so well. You all know that already, okay? All right. Right. So I was just about to kind of paint in the lagoon back there, and there's a lovely reflection of the green onto the water. So I need to mix my greens now. And I think I can lose some of these colors because not really in my picture today. I hate wiping them out though. It just breaks my heart. And this is some acrylic that got stuck on there, so that's not going anywhere. Okay. So when I mix greens, I like to use an array of different greens. I have a color that I call default green, and that is cadmium yellow and Prussian blue. And that color kind of makes the green that I mostly see in the world that I live in. So I like to have that ready. So that's my default green. Okay. Sap green is a terrific color, but it's very vibrant. It's very intense. It's made with phthalo blue, and phthalo blue is a lab-created modern color that really stands out. So I use sap green, but I use it kind of selectively. I think I'm going to put some on my palette right now because I do see a few spots where it might be useful. But if you compare the default green of this Prussian blue mix with cadmium yellow to the sap green, you can really see how that pops out. So we have to be a little judicious. Now there are some spots on this, I've got it on my brush, so I'm going to use it, where the sun is kind of backlighting some of these leaves and they look really brilliant. So I'm going to use up the paint that's on my brush here. Now, somebody just commented, I'm eavesdropping, on the size of my brush. I think I heard someone say something. When I teach, I ask people, this looks a little too blue, so I'm going to mix a little yellow in it. I ask people to usually get around like number 5 or number 6, and you can paint a whole painting with that. Now, some of this foliage sticks up above the wall into the sky, and I'm taking advantage of this very yellowish color because there's blue in the sky that's going to mix with it to make it green. Okay, and then there's a very, very bright bank of lily pads right here on the lagoon. So I'm going to put that in, and right away I'm going to get into my pale blue. So I want a soft edge. Now there's this stone balustrade here, and I did not draw in all the negative spaces where we see the lagoon in between the uprights of this balustrade. So I'm going to just do it with my brush. And they sort of, you know, actually I'm doing it backwards. Oops. I'm painting the negative space in between. I'm trying not to block your view over there. Sorry. All right, so I'm just sort of making this up as I go along.
Are you getting on dry right now?
Sorry? The paper? It's dry. You can pretty well assume it's going to be dry. Yeah. This is wet right here, where I did this was wet into wet, but now I'm doing these little details. And I'm trying to keep straight in my mind the negative space around these little stone thingies. And, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, obviously. It's not going to be perfect. Okay, but that gives you the idea, the impression. This was a wet into wet area. And I'm just going to put a little more of this blue along the top of this stone thing. Railing, I guess you could call it. Just to kind of make that show up better. Okay, so I think we're ready for foliage. Okay. Now I'm going to avail myself of a clean bucket. I don't like it when people use these little tiny cups of water. Be generous with yourselves. Water is free. Okay. So I always have 2 of these when I sit down to paint so I can swap them out without having to go to the sink. And I eat a lot of yogurt. Every few days I've got another one of those. All right. Actually, before I do the green, I think I'm going to do that little, there's this little roof. I'd like to get that in because the green will come in front of it, and maybe I'll do the brick wall as well. All right, so I'm going to get to my cool palette over here, and I'm going to use some Payne's Gray, and I'll mix in a little bit of the sky mix. It's pretty perfect. And then the side of it is in shadow, so I'll use a more saturated color. And actually the corner of it, which I didn't notice before, it's really in sunlight. And that's almost like that khaki color, which is right here. brushing it out so it's almost like white. And then this is weathered. So there's some streaks on it, and you can do that either with a paper towel or with your brush. I guess I'll try it with the brush. I dried the brush so that it will suck up some of the paint. So that worked very nicely, actually. And when you do this, you want to keep washing off the pigment, because if you don't, you're just putting it right back. And then I can do the little lines for the little shingles. And then there's a little trim below that, which I can use the khaki color for. Okay. And for the brick, there's kind of a light mortar in between the bricks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that down first, and then I'll paint the bricks with a stroke brush. And I'll show you what a stroke brush is in a moment. So I'm going to negative paint around the mortar, in other words, with little strokes. Yeah, actually, yeah, thank you. There we go. Thank you for pointing that out. Don't hesitate to do that, because the whole point is for you to see it. Not much use if you don't. All right, so I've got that khaki color mixed up already, and that's a good start for my mortar color. I'm adding water, and I'm going to add a little bit of this kind of coral color. And actually, I think I'm going to use my 1-inch flat so I can do it really fast. Just going to paint the whole wall. And I don't have to pick around my leaves and stuff, because this color is so unsaturated. It's barely impinging on anything that I've painted already, because these colors are really bright. But it will give me a mortar color that isn't the white of the paper, which is what I want, because the wall's a little bit in shadow. And I want it, for instance, to not be as light white as the clouds or these hollyhocks that I masked. So even though this is going to mostly be foliage, I'm just dropping it in. That's okay. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Down here we have other things going on with the dirt and stuff. Okay, so that hopefully will dry quickly. And you notice I'm not working super wet. I'm an impatient person. I really don't like sitting around waiting for stuff to dry. So I put on as much water as I need and no more. Okay, so now I'm gonna see I'm touching this and it's feeling dry, so I'm gonna do the other part of that roof. This guy. Now I like natural sable brushes, and particularly Kolinsky sables. They have a little more snap to them. They have a little more body than a regular sable. I paint in egg tempera as well. And egg tempera's the paint has more body to it. So the Kolinskys are perfect for that, but they're also great for watercolor. Now you notice I turned the paper. It's because ergonomically it's always easier to paint horizontally and be steady. Vertical is harder. And even though this is, I think, a size 8, it's a good brush, so I get a nice point on it. All right. This is still a little wet, but hopefully by the time I get to it with my stroke brush, it'll be dry. All right, so stroke brushes. A stroke brush is a wedge-shaped brush. It's straight on the end and flat. Okay, so it's like a flat, But the difference is a stroke brush, the bristles are longer than a flat. So here, for instance, is a flat. You see the difference? Okay. And the stroke brushes are great. These are, they're not numbered like other brushes. So this one is an 1/8 inch, 1/8, and this is 1/4. And these are Princeton brushes. This one's about to come off, unfortunately. If you have your ferrule come off the handle, you can glue it back on. Not a big deal. So I always, you may have noticed that I push my brush down to the bottom of the bucket when I wet it, and that's to get all the air out that's between the bristles. So I watch those bubbles come up. I'm not doing it this time though, because this ferrule is so loose. I don't really want to get a whole bunch of water inside there. So, yeah. All right, so this is my 1/8 inch stroke, and this is going to be just perfect for these bricks. And they do get a little smaller as I go back, so I'll try to lift the brush up a little. All right, so the brick color, I've got this color mixed. And it's in shadow though, so I'm going to actually add some more sepia to it. Darken it up quite a bit. It's not bad. I want to make it a little pinker, so I'm going to add some more Lucerne Crimson.
Yes.
A little more. It went like too brown. There we go. Okay. So the cap of the wall is actually looks like concrete. I'm even thinking maybe I'll use the 1/4 inch one. This is going to take me forever if I use the 1/8 inch one. So, for the sake of expediency, if not accuracy. See how this looks. Now, when you do bricks, remember that you have to do every other. You have to offset the bricks, right? So it's like this. Because if you line them up, the wall is going to fall down. So try to be accurate. That color's pretty good. And the other thing is, I have to line them up so that they're not at a funny angle, which they may be. So the side of the brick, it should be an upright stroke that's parallel with the side of my picture. And I'm kind of angling it a little, so I'm going to correct that. And obviously I'm not doing this perfectly. I don't think I'm going to get arrested if my bricks are a little goofy. Yeah, the brick police are going to come and find me. So this is actually really fun to do. But I mean, I'm glad I used the bigger one so that you didn't have to sit here for 15 minutes and watch me do this. But isn't that so fun? One of the things I love about this is that you have the contrast of something that's geometrical and straight lines with the organic. And that is just a basic, wonderful element of design. And I've had a few people ask me, where did I take this photo? And I want to comment about that. This was shot, I took this photo right outside the English walled garden, if you are familiar. So it's on the pathway on the outside. They've got just a gorgeous bed there with so many flowers. And you're looking south towards the lagoon there. And this edge is a little hanky. Okay. So, and then I've got, there's like this sort of sticks out. How can I, okay, the way I'll indicate that is just by having this line of mortar. It needs to be kind of straight. I'm talking to myself. Sorry. I bet you all do that.
Yeah.
Because if you're a person who sits in a room and paints, you're going to be talking to yourself. It's just inevitable. I have a student in one of my classes who you know, I'm the teacher, so I get to talk to myself the whole time and you're paying me for that. But she does it too. So that's what the mute button's for on Zoom. And she isn't offended. She gets it. She's actually a terrific artist too. And so when I get down to about here, I've got a lot of foliage filling in, so I don't have to worry about the bricks, even though I know that they're there. I don't have to put them in. And I'm almost to the point where I'm done with brickwork. I know you're happy to hear that. Because as much as I'm enjoying it, it's a little boring for you. Okay, that's about it. Yeah. Now, when we do foliage, it is a good idea to paint the leaves before you paint the trunks and branches. You probably know that because leaves come in front of trunks and branches. And because watercolor is transparent, if you paint the whole trunk in and you try to put a leaf in front of it, you're still going to see trunk. So I like the idea of a yellowish wash behind my foliage. I don't mind some white sparkle in a watercolor. In other words, I'm not going to fill in every single spot on my watercolor painting. There will be some places where the white of the paper will show, and I don't mind that. I think that's kind of characteristic of watercolor. But that being said, I also like to sort of put down a little bit of a yellow wash behind my foliage often. So that's what I'm going to do. And actually, there will still be probably some gaps. So this area actually has that mortar color already, the mortar that I put on the wall. So just put, this is a very, very pale wash. And one of the things it does is, I mean, it's very obvious right now because I penciled everything in, but it also shows me where to put foliage. I have the yellow. So oftentimes when I paint, I will paint without much pencil at all. And this pencil, I think, I don't know if it's going to erase. You know, one thing about erasing the pencil as you go is that sometimes when you put pencil down and you paint over it, it doesn't come off, right? You know this, okay. So as you can see, it's not really coming off. So that's one of the reasons I like to move it. Okay. So down on my foreground. I hope I'm not going too slow.
You're 25 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, better let's speed it up a little bit. I'm just, you know, this isn't really filling it all in. Also, I'm kind of used to working on, you know, it's funny, 140-pound cold press is not quite as bumpy as the 300. I can't account for that. It should be the same. But feels like this is a little bumpier, which is fine. Okay, let's do the face of the figure. And her hand, actually, she's wearing a glove, gardening glove. So I'm going to paint that brown. Just taking some of this burnt sienna color that I had. And mix a little Payne's Gray into it. Correct it a little bit. I bragged about this fine point on this brush, but it's a very tiny space for a big brush. Okay. All right, so the flesh tone. There are books on how to mix flesh tones, as you know. You don't do people. Oh, you could. So I usually start with yellow ochre, and I'm talking about a Caucasian lady now. It's not the same for all different kinds of flesh tones, obviously. I start with yellow ochre and go into some of the reds that I already have. A little more of the red, maybe. It's a tiny area, so. Now Homer, really, you can see like Homer was all about the woods and the lakes. Figures were there really just to give scale. I mean, he really was not a people person. You can tell that from his work. But most of his people are men, and they're mostly like fishing guides and hunters. And you will notice that you can see a couple people in a canoe. He will really exaggerate the red on their flesh, like on the knuckles and on their nose, maybe on their knees. And what that does is it amplifies all the green that's around it. So that was a little kind of trick that he used that I had liked. So let's see about a little pink blush on this lady. Okay, that's pretty bright. Alrighty. There's this big tub. She's, I think, weeding. She's a volunteer. So it's the tub. And I have some nice browns from another day. These are raw umber, burnt umber mixes. So now what I'm going to do is, ooh, that's saturated. I'm going to do what I call getting the white out, which means looking at my page and getting busy filling in everything that it doesn't have paint on it yet. That's a little thing I say to myself. Get the white out, Jude. It's time to get the white out. It's like keeps me on target, keeps me focused, gets me working a little faster when I need to. Right, so in this, there's some weeds and stuff. I'm doing a little negative painting around the handles. It's just sort of dry stuff, and I'll add some green to that in a minute. And I'll add a little shadow, a little bluish shadow to the tub so that it's not monochromatic. And here, if I introduce too much water, I'm going to get a bloom. So I'm being a little careful about that. I'm putting a shadow under my figure, under the tub. Which I'm going to then blend out. And actually, this is probably a good moment to go ahead and do my shadows on the walkway. While I'm at it. So I've got my Payne's Gray and my Sky Blue. Now you could put water down first, or you could put water down second and soften your edges. I think in this case, I'm going to put a little water down first. But not a lot because I don't want blooms. So I'm brushing it into the paper. So I'm really pushing it in. It's not a real super sloppy brush. That looks a little too bluish. And in areas that I didn't wet it, I can wet it after. There are little shafts of sunlight too. Now I'm going to take this 1-inch flat, which just is a little damp, and I'm just going to blend the color out a little bit. And it's good to do that kind of quick because the Payne's gray is a staining color. That's fine. And then let's,
20 minutes left.
okay, I better, yes, sorry. Speed it up. Thank you. I will finish, I promise. So I'm putting the gray in on this wall. A little shadow under it. Okay, and some shading on the figure. I'll use that same color. And I have the folds all kind of drawn in. Oops, I gotta be careful not to put my hand in the wet. Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to exaggerate contrasts. For one thing, things always dry lighter, right, than how they look when you're painting them. But the other thing is I just like the look of a strong contrast in my work. Watercolor is a very soft medium, so it doesn't hurt to kind of punch things up a little bit. I mean, that's a stylistic choice, obviously, but that's what I like to do. So you see how I have the second brush handy with water on it to modify my edges. And edges are a really important thing that I talk a lot about when I teach too, because you want a variety of edges in your work. You don't want all the edges to be harder, all the edges to be mushy. I think that having variety in edges is really important because it adds interest to the piece. And actually, on the face, the pencil is good because it's like so tiny. I don't really want to draw everything. It's nice to have a little bit of pencil to define the features very, very slightly. Okay. Time for foliage. I'm going to mix a bunch of greens. I already have my default green. I have my sap green. I'm going to mix a green with yellow ochre, and that's going to give me more of an olive green. Actually, that's not it. It's acridone gold. They're right next to each other. Look a lot alike. Right. Oh, I think I'll use my chromium oxide green with yellow ochre. Chromium oxide green is like the cadmiums in that the pigment has more density to it. So when you compare it to like Payne's gray, which is right, see, is it? Okay. All right, so here's, sorry, I meant to say sap green, not Payne's gray. All right, so here's my sap green, and it's very transparent, and chromium oxide green just has more density to it. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. But that's one of the things that you can use to create variety within your painting is the actual density of the pigment that you're using. Now, these trees way in the back, actually, I'm going to go from the front back. Okay, so I'll start with this. I'm going to start with Payne's gray in the foreground. Sorry, I keep saying that. Sap green is what I'm trying to say. I'm doing that. It's a little not right, so I'm going to add some cobalt to it. And a little yellow. Ooh, I shouldn't have done that. I always rinse my brush, especially before I go into the yellow, and I just broke my own rule. So I added yellow to the sap green. So I'm going to look on the photo for areas that have a brighter, more sunlit green. I've already sort of started doing that. Do more of it now. Very just quick little dash strokes. There's this sort of vine coming up, which is very charming. And one of the things when we're painting plants, it's great to try to vary the shape of the strokes too. Right now I'm just sort of dashing in some quick strokes, but that's something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to mix in this orangey color with the green. More saturation. And you also want to think about the way these colors are going to group on the page. In other words, you want to distribute them so it leads your eye through the composition. And of course, red pulls your eye more strongly than anything. So it's important to kind of, not just have it in one area. So I'm putting a few of these little orangey strokes in here too. Get back to the green. And I don't mind if these blend, allowing them to be wet into wet. Okay. Now I want to get a little more description of these. Somebody named them. What were they? These red ones?
Oh, phlox.
Phlox. Because they have long stems. So I want to include that. And you notice there's a lot of light color behind what I'm doing right now. It's okay. In fact, in this little space between the legs, I don't want to get too dark because I want the legs to show up. This is all in shadow back here, so. So I'm extending the color that I put here, I'm putting it on the other side of the figure. That helps us understand the space. It sort of pushes that plane back. You don't want to necessarily start with a totally different deal on this side of the figure because this gives you continuity. Now, where I have the hollyhocks, that is the masking fluid here. It's important to get some pretty saturated color around it because otherwise they're not going to show up and it will have been a wasted effort to put the white down, to mask the white, in other words. So always remember when you're using masking fluid to use some good saturated color behind it. A little crazy there with my stroke. And putting in this darker green next to the face. The figure kind of helps it show up. I think I just took off her nose. Well, she now has a little bob nose.
She's turning away from you.
There you go. Okay, so I'm blocking in. And then once this is dry, I can put some more leaf shapes over it to give it a little more definition. And I've got all these little blobs of orange and yellow. I'm just sort of trying to negative paint around them. I know I'm racing, but I want to stop and look for a minute. Ran out of default green. And this is why I do like to mix my colors really before I paint, because, so you don't run out. I mean, sometimes you do anyway. But when you're, for instance, painting a big blue sky, you don't want to run out of the blue halfway across, right? Because then you have to stop and mix and you get a line. So be generous with your, the amounts of colors that you mix. And I can sort of negative paint as I'm putting this color in around these blossoms, not painted like I'm painting a wall. Be a little more mindful, purposeful. Okay, starting to look like something. Okay. All right. There are a lot of shiny edges to the leaves over here. So my thought is to put in the positive strokes of the leaves, but to leave little gaps between them to pick up how that looks in the photo. Try to imitate that.
About a 30. Do we go?
Do we end at 11:30? Okay. I'm mixing a little. Sorry?
You got this.
Thank you. I appreciate your confidence. I do. I really do. Just mixed in a little Payne's gray because there's a dark shadow here on the bottom. It's also good, generally speaking, to have it a little darker on the bottom. It grounds your piece. Now I'm throwing that color in up here too. Yeah, get the trees in too. I will. I'm really just throwing the stop so fast because I want to get to those trees.
It's good.
Okay. Sometimes the less you think, the better it works out. So, go figure. And I'm going to get some just water in here. Remember that whole idea of letting the paint kind of spread into the water? So it's a little more vivid and just also the idea of the sunlight catching it. Okay. I'm going to put some dark here and hollyhock to give it some depth. Stems. Okay, trees in the back. They're very much in shadow, so that's a good place for Payne's gray. Whoa. Okay. I'm gonna mix some more. Oh no, my brush was messy. I messed up my yellow. Go back to default green, okay? But I'm gonna mix in a lot of Payne's gray too. Here we go. Now this brush is very loaded, so I'm gonna kind of relieve most of the load where it's more dense. And then go back out to the perimeter because my brush has less paint on it now and I can get smaller brush strokes for these little tiny leaves. And I don't mind adding in a little water there. It just sort of spreads paint. I'm leaving a little bit of white. And I'm painting the trunk of the tree this way because I didn't want a real hard line because it's sort of broken up by the foliage. Okay, so put a little sepia on that trunk too. Get it. Okay. Almost there. All right, I have to do this far shore. And you see the benefit of having that pale yellow back there. Now, I want this to look a little faded because that will help it recede in space. There we go. That's what we call atmospheric perspective. Colors that are things that we see in the back are usually, they look cooler and duller, and things that are in the front look warmer and brighter, and you can paint them that way to amplify it. Okay. I have to wait for that to dry to take off the mask. Almost there. Just helping it dry. Okay, so to take off the masking fluid, I have something called a rubber cement pickup, which is a truly archaic remnant of earlier times when cut and paste was literal, right? You cut pieces of paper and paste them with rubber cement, and I'm just adding a little bit of this because some of you, yeah, graphic designers, what a long way we have come. I know I'm kind of running over a little bit. I'm sorry. So let's get that off. I'm not going to probably be able to remove the masking fluid there. Usually I would get a little distance from it. And I mean, I will add a little more detail to the red flowers, another maybe a slightly different red, but I don't know if I'll have time to do that right now. So for the hollyhocks, they do have hard edges. They're very crisp little white flowers, so using the masking fluid really makes sense. I'm picking, this is a rubber cement pickup, and I'm just picking up that stuff. But you can add little shading on the flowers by putting down a little bit of water. And then maybe just a little bit of a bluish shadow. And they have, I think, yellow centers, but that could be added after this dries. But this just gives them a little dimension so they don't look quite so graphic. Whoops, I missed one. Now be sure that that everything's dry when you use the rubber cement pickup, because otherwise you'll just smear everything and you'll tear the paper actually. So you have to be cautious with that. Let's try and lift that off. Hopefully I won't give you an example of torn paper and smeared feet. Smearing a little with that. So I can go back in with my darker greens, and give some shading, some weight to some of this. The red. Is going to need some, a little more. Punch it up exactly. So I've got like more of a fire engine red, and then I added some glycerin. Thank you. Wonderful. It was really fun. I love painting with you. It looks so pale up there. Really, you need to
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a lot different.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to come up and see it and to take a picture if you want. Yeah, there's more I would do, shade the wall and all that, but I did most of it.
Okay.